90 seconds. That's genuinely roughly how long it took for an entire carefully planned evening to go sideways. Right there in front of a sold-out room. A 76-year-old man walks past Meghan's outstretched hand, doesn't stop, doesn't glance at her, finds his own spot on the carpet, and gets on with the last big night of his career like she isn't standing there at all.
Meghan Markle has an extreme case of main character syndrome, basically a situation where somebody thinks they are the main player, the protagonist in the story of their lives and the lives of everyone around them.
Watch her face in the half-second right after it happens. That's the clip everyone online has been passing around all week.
You just get the sense of Meghan Markle just tries to do whatever she can to bring attention to herself and act like it's just so casual, but she's still attempting to do it. She also is still attempting to direct people because, again, this is a film production of her life, guys. So she needs to direct people as to where to stand because apparently a producer who is in his 70s and has been in the entertainment industry for years and years, he apparently doesn't know how to stand on the red carpet. He needs Meghan Markle to direct him because she's the ultimate director.
But here's the thing. That 90-second moment isn't actually the story. It's just the part that got noticed. The real story is everything that happened before it and what happened right after. Let me set the whole scene properly first, because the details actually matter here more than people realize. Victoria, British Columbia, Friday night, purple carpet, black tie, $5,000 a seat, $20,000 if you wanted the whole weekend package, 40 years of one man's charity, raising money for families with children waiting on organ transplants. His hometown, reportedly his final ever gala, and it sold out completely.
David Foster and Catherine McPhee in Canada for their charity gala was not surprisingly a complete mess for Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. Meghan, look at this. She just can't help directing traffic on a red carpet, can she? When a picture tells the real story, the Fosters cannot stand Meghan and Harry.
Everyone who'd paid for a ticket was already inside and seated when Harry and Meghan showed up on the carpet, unannounced. Which, fair enough. When have those two ever walked into a room that wasn't already looking elsewhere? Here's the specific detail that most coverage skipped right past, though, and it's honestly the part I find most interesting. Meghan reportedly didn't just attend that gala. She started producing it, right there on the spot. Within minutes, she was reportedly arranging the group for photos, filming herself walking a corridor of musicians, pulling Harry into frame, narrating her own entrance, and staying in the photo line well past the point where a guest typically steps aside so the actual host gets his moment.
When will she learn? She just needs to go and stand and smile and avoid this awkwardness in front of banks of cameras.
A guest shows up, smiles, supports the cause, moves along. From what's been described, she spent the night hunting for content, while the man whose name was literally on the foundation waited for a moment that was supposed to be his. There's also a whisper going around Canada that she'd specifically asked to have the carpet to herself at someone else's 40th anniversary event. Every second of the footage that surfaced plays like a woman who genuinely believed the room belonged to her. It didn't, and she was reportedly about to find that out in real time. Before we even get to that specific carpet moment, though, there's actually a separate clip from earlier that same night that's been generating its own wave of reaction entirely, and I think it's worth walking through first, because it sets up everything that follows.
Meghan Markle chose to do the unthinkable on the red carpet. When I tell you that this woman loves to burn bridges because she had nothing to lose. She knows she's not coming back because David Foster is not doing these events anymore. This is the 40th year he's done this.
She's walking a corridor lined with pipers and drummers, professional musicians who've reportedly performed for actual heads of state, and she's laughing along the line. Then she turns to the room and announces that her husband loves bagpipes. Harry, standing 2 feet away, capable of speaking for himself, doesn't get the chance. She delivers the line about him in the third person to a room of strangers. Someone was reportedly walking backward down that corridor with a camera capturing all of it. Worth sitting with for a second. A staff member employed specifically to walk backward filming a giggle. For a couple who've spent 6 years in court fighting the British press over exactly this kind of intrusive documentation of their private lives. Then Harry, from what's been described, actually turned toward the pipers himself.
as she has been for the last 10 years. And unfortunately, performances like this are becoming more and more grating on the public day after day. And Meghan Markle would be so much better served to not wear a toga that looks like she has a dirty diaper and instead actually embrace her vain, vapid, and shallowness.
Real conversation, genuinely engaged, and Meghan reportedly stayed hovering just behind his shoulder, still technically in frame, apparently waiting for the camera's attention to swing back to her. If you're finding this story interesting, hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel keep digging into stories like this one. Inside the gala, things reportedly got more pointed. Adam Levine got up to perform, and according to multiple accounts, Meghan got up too. Not to a dance floor, because there wasn't one. This was a seated black tie dinner. She reportedly stood and danced in front of a stage, blocking the view of the people seated directly behind her.
How tacky. Not bidding for the gala, not helping towards fundraising, but filming your place settings for social media content. I swear she's mentally stuck at the age of 12, just like Harry. And I mean, I felt this, look at this, when she was awkwardly dancing and actually hollering during an Adam Levine performance, just making sure everyone's actually watching her. But no one was watching her.
People who'd paid $5,000 specifically to watch the performer, not the back of someone's head. Harry, by most accounts, stayed seated the entire time. Footage reportedly shows Meghan leaning toward him repeatedly, apparently urging him to get up and join her. He reportedly didn't move. Whatever you make of that specific moment, it's genuinely notable. A man who's rarely, if ever, publicly declined to follow her lead, apparently drawing a line at a children's charity dinner. Okay, now let's actually go back to the carpet itself and walk through those specific 90 seconds properly, step by step, because I think the sequence really matters.
Harry's awkward smile really said it all. It's like he's looking very unhappy. Look at that. And then he realizes, oh gosh, she is recording me again. I better smile.
Here's what a lot of coverage missed. Harry and Meghan had already had their moment by that point. Cameras had captured the arrival. The outfit was photographed. Presence established. That's typically the point where guests step aside so hosts get their own clean shot. According to reports, they reportedly didn't move, meaning the host and his wife had to come stand alongside them instead, since the couple wouldn't clear the frame. On the one night in 40 years that this specific man had earned the right to that carpet by himself. Then, reportedly, the arm came out, extended, angled slightly downward, indicating a spot on the floor. Not a wave. Not an offered handshake left hanging, whatever some outlets have suggested. Anyone who's ever watched an awards show recognizes that gesture instantly. It's the motion of someone directing where another person should stand, and the host, from every account, walked straight past it. No greeting, no pause. Just past the extended arm, to his own chosen spot. Meghan reportedly started adjusting her dress right after.
I have to be honest, like, the imagery that Meghan chose to put out, I don't think she realizes that we just totally see through her act now, like this with the sexy bagpipe troupe.
I love bagpipes.
Oh my God. This is great. So where am I?
Yeah.
Watch for that specific tell, according to multiple observers. Hands going straight to fabric the moment a room doesn't go the way it was apparently expected to. Here's the part that almost nobody covering this actually connected properly though, and I genuinely think it's the single most important thread running through this entire story. That specific arm gesture isn't new. There's reportedly a prior instance, and the outcome for the person on the receiving end of it was considerably more serious than an awkward carpet moment. Florida, roughly 2 years earlier. A polo match. Not for a stranger's charity this time, but for Harry's own. Sentebale, the organization he co-founded at 21 alongside Lesotho's Prince Seeiso, in memory of both their mothers, supporting children affected by HIV. Trophy presentation. Harry standing there, alongside Dr. Sophie Chandaka, the charity's chairwoman, a corporate finance lawyer, and an MBE recipient. Meghan reportedly arrived, and according to accounts of the moment, that same arm gesture appeared, indicating where she wanted Chandaka positioned, apparently not beside Harry, but beside herself.
I had loves bagpipes. And you gotta wonder, who is this poor soul forced to carry this camera and film her giggling at herself, her horrible hairstyle here, and her dirty diaper toga? Who is in charge of filming this? Every time Meghan laughs, I just can't help but think of a really bad actress attempting to laugh. Laughing authentically is harder than crying. And I kind of believe that in a way, because you can definitely look fake laughing. Crying might be a little bit easier to pull off because you just have to bring the emotion. But laughter is a bit hard, and Meghan looks like she's acting badly.
Chandauka reportedly ducked under the trophy in front of a field of donors to reposition accordingly. What followed afterward is where things escalated considerably. According to Chandauka's own later public account, a request reportedly came through Harry's team asking her to issue a statement defending Meghan. She reportedly declined, saying she wouldn't let the charity become, in her words, an extension of the Sussex PR operation. She's also described receiving a subsequent message from Harry himself, reportedly demanding an explanation. People who reportedly witnessed the exchange described her characterization of it using words like difficult and imperious. 11 months later, that charity was in serious turmoil. Trustees departed, both royal patrons gone, and Chandauka publicly alleging harassment and bullying, in testimony given in front of British media. This past spring, the charity itself filed suit against Harry in the High Court. Think about that Florida moment for a second, because it genuinely changes how you read what happened in Victoria. That wasn't a stranger's charity. That was Harry's own foundation, named for his mother, built when he was barely out of his teens. And by most accounts, the exact same gesture, arm out, someone repositioned, happened there too, years earlier, with considerably more serious consequences for the person on the receiving end. So the actual question genuinely worth asking is why someone would keep showing up to run other people's charity events at all, given everything that's reportedly already unfolded around the ones directly connected to this same family.
And even went out of her way to wear a Canadian designer for her gown. And they're very much trying to, again, he's trying to do that buddy-buddy thing with the bagpipers. They're just very much trying to emulate this life that they left. And everything looks increasingly strained because they look ridiculous. They're acting ridiculous. They left. They chose to leave. And there are perfectly legitimate ways for them to have somewhat of a public profile, but not constantly looking like they're trying to recreate what they lost.
It's worth pausing here to acknowledge the fair counterpoint before going further into Bauer's specific findings. Charity finances are genuinely complicated. Operational costs, staff salaries, administrative overhead, none of that is inherently scandalous on its own, and every legitimate charity spends meaningfully on things beyond direct beneficiary support. The question is always about proportion, not about whether overhead exists at all. With that said, biographer Tom Bauer has spent roughly 4 years and 2 full books trying to answer exactly that specific question. And last spring, he published a specific figure that's hard to look past. According to Bauer's reporting, roughly £1.15 million came into Sentebale during its early years, driven substantially by concerts, a documentary, and Diana's own name attached to every invitation. Of that, Bauer reports, roughly £84,000 actually reached children affected by HIV in southern Africa. That's somewhere around 7% by his accounting. A meaningful portion of the remainder reportedly went toward operational costs, including a 4-bedroom villa with staff and private school fees. For the director's own children, not the children the charity was ostensibly serving. Bauer's later reporting is arguably harsher still. According to his account, Harry reportedly stopped visiting that part of Africa for roughly 5 years at one point. His stated reason, per Bauer's book, Meghan reportedly didn't want to go. It's worth being genuinely fair here too, because there could easily be a more complicated, more human explanation for reduced travel that has nothing to do with any single person's preferences, security logistics, evolving family priorities, the sheer difficulty of coordinating international travel with young children, any number of ordinary factors that rarely make it into a biography's more dramatic framing. Whether or not that specific framing is entirely fair, though, Bauer's broader conclusion in his own reporting remains genuinely blunt, that Harry, in his assessment, cares more about his own reputation than about the actual beneficiaries of the causes attached to his name.
David Foster and Catherine knew that they invited Harry and Meghan, they would get more headlines, and that's what they wanted, and that's what they got, and that's all they cared about. Harry and Meghan have nothing to offer except for that royal piece, and they exploit it quite a bit, but it has a limited bandwidth, and they're just there for kind of the shock value. They're not really there because anybody actually them there. And the performance with the bagpipers is just the worst example of that.
On the Archewell Foundation specifically, Bauer's characterization is similarly direct. Not really a charity in the traditional sense, closer to a commercial operation, with a relatively small fraction of overall revenue actually distributed as grants. It's genuinely worth naming that Bauer isn't a neutral observer here either. He's built a career and considerable book sales on critical biographies of exactly this couple, which is context worth holding on to while weighing how much independent weight to give his specific conclusions versus treating them as one strongly opinionated account among several possible readings. Bauer also draws a direct and genuinely uncomfortable comparison to Diana herself throughout his reporting on this entire subject. His own summary of her actual charitable work is fairly glowing, describing genuine, sustained, hands-on engagement, hospice visits, hospital wards, sitting with AIDS patients in 1987 when public fear around the disease was still widespread, and famously removing her gloves to hold a dying man's hand in front of cameras, in a moment credited with genuinely shifting public understanding of the disease. Bauer's assessment of Meghan by direct comparison is pointed. According to his reporting, he doesn't believe she's shown comparable willingness to spend sustained time in hospices or hospitals with the seriously ill, characterizing her preference instead as favoring more glamorous settings and company. Whether that specific characterization is entirely fair is worth questioning on its own. It's one biographer's assessment, not a comprehensive audit of anyone's charitable activity, but it's the comparison Bauer himself keeps returning to throughout his reporting, and it's worth including as part of understanding how his broader critique has been constructed.
You will hear her shouting and screaming, but this is really interesting because people were saying that she was arguing with Harry. Nobody was paying attention to them. They were on the side table. They were not in the middle of the they were not in the main table, in the center table. They were on the side, and nobody was paying attention to Meghan Markle. And we know that Meghan Markle can't live without attention. All the cameras need to be on her. And she was arguing with Harry, asking him to get up and sing, to make a scene,
It's also worth genuinely acknowledging that direct comparisons between any two people's charitable approaches inevitably flatten a lot of real complexity. Diana operated within an institutional structure with resources, security, and decades of established royal protocol behind her hospital visits. Meghan's post-royal charitable work happens in a completely different context entirely, without that same institutional scaffolding, which doesn't excuse anything specific but does complicate a clean side-by-side comparison somewhat. Which brings us, honestly, to the actual reason a couple with genuinely global reach ends up at a mid-sized Canadian charity gala at all, rather than somewhere considerably more high-profile. By most accounts currently circulating, the major headline-grabbing invitations this couple was once reliably receiving have genuinely slowed down considerably over the past year or so. No Met Gala this year. Limited presence at major award ceremonies. Bauer, when asked directly this past summer where he genuinely thinks this couple ultimately ends up given everything currently unfolding around them, reportedly answered with just two blunt words: desperation and failure. A fairly damning assessment coming from someone who's spent years studying this specific family closely. According to Bauer's own reported assessment, their overall finances are currently under genuine strain, and he's described them as effectively hoping for eventual reconciliation with the king, but doing so from a considerably weaker negotiating position than they held when they first stepped back from royal duties years ago. On Meghan specifically, Bauer's own assessment is similarly stark, describing her broader commercial prospects as largely diminished at this point, with the Netflix relationship reportedly concluded, and, in his stated view, no genuinely clear alternative revenue stream currently visible to replace what's been lost over recent years. Again, worth remembering this is one biographer's characterization rather than an independently verified financial audit, but it's a characterization that's gained real traction across multiple outlets regardless. Which perhaps explains, at least in part, why a charity gala on a Canadian island most of the wider entertainment industry probably couldn't locate on a map without help ended up getting a yes from this particular couple, when so many other invitations reportedly haven't. There's also, separately, a specific claim currently circulating locally in Canadian coverage, that the foundation reportedly covered the couple's entire trip, flights and accommodation included. That specific detail genuinely remains unconfirmed at this stage, worth flagging clearly as such rather than repeating it as settled fact. What is genuinely worth noting, though, is that in the days since this whole story broke, no major outlet actually appears to have asked the fairly obvious follow-up question: whether the couple personally purchased their own tickets, bid on any of the evening's auction items, or contributed anything themselves toward the actual cause they were there to support. As far as I can tell, nobody's asked that specific question directly, publicly, of anyone involved. Draw your own conclusion from that particular gap in the reporting, because it's genuinely a strange thing to overlook entirely given everything else being scrutinized about this exact weekend. It's worth holding one more piece of nuance before we move to Saturday too. Public figures generally don't post about every crisis happening in every place they visit. That's not automatically evidence of indifference on its own, since selective posting is fairly standard practice across essentially all public figures managing social media. What makes this particular silence land differently is the specific contrast with what did get posted that same weekend, rather than silence in complete isolation. Then Saturday happened, and Saturday genuinely tells its own separate, considerably quieter story. There was a genuinely separate event that same day. Free, fully open to the entire public, with thousands of ordinary Victoria families reportedly gathering down at the harbor for a full drone show and a fireworks display, marking a full 40 years of community work being handed back quietly and symbolically to the actual town that helped build it in the first place. No carpet this time. No rope line separating anyone. No photographers stationed and waiting for a dramatic entrance of any kind. And, from every account available, no appearance from either Harry or Meghan at that specific event. No coverage of them being there. No sighting reported anywhere. Not a single mention on either of their own social accounts either, despite an entire weekend spent in that exact city at an event connected to the same general cause they'd shown up for so visibly just one night earlier. Meanwhile, running in parallel to all of this, that same province was reportedly dealing with something considerably more serious than any single social event. More than 20,000 people across the region had reportedly been displaced entirely from their own homes by ongoing wildfires. British Columbia's government had reportedly declared a formal state of emergency over the crisis. And from a couple with enormous public reach and an active phone in hand throughout the weekend, silence on that front entirely. What actually did eventually get posted from the entire weekend was reportedly just a single video, a dessert, a giggle in a hallway, captioned the next morning with a Canadian flag emoji and a heart. Nothing about the foundation itself. Nothing about the cause, the families involved, or the reported $14.5 million raised over 4 decades. Nothing about the wildfire crisis unfolding in the same province, the same weekend. And then, in the hours that followed, people started digging through that exact post more carefully and reportedly found something genuinely striking buried in the engagement details. Meghan's own brand account had liked her own personal post. Her own company, liking her own photo, on her own page. That detail alone genuinely tells you something worth sitting with for a moment. Not necessarily proof of anyone's specific intent behind it, but a real, observable gap between how a moment appeared designed to land publicly and how it actually seemed to land in practice with genuine outside engagement. Sometimes the most revealing details in a story like this aren't the dramatic confrontations at all. They're the quiet, almost accidental ones. A company account liking its own founder's post, doing the work an audience was apparently supposed to do organically, but didn't. There's clearly a lot more to this entire ongoing story than just one single gala weekend in Victoria, obviously. But I think this specific weekend genuinely functions as a useful snapshot of a much larger pattern people have been describing for a while now. But here's where it actually lands. She showed up seemingly intending to run the evening. 90 seconds later, a man who spent his career around famous people walked straight past her, took his own spot, and left her adjusting her dress in front of a sold-out room. She arrived, by most accounts, to direct the moment. Instead, she got quietly written out of it. What do you genuinely think happened here? Was that carpet moment actually a deliberate snub in the way so much of the online reaction has framed it? Or is there a genuinely simpler explanation available? An older man on the single biggest night of his entire career, understandably focused on his own moment rather than anyone else standing beside him on that carpet. And separately, on the specific Sentebale numbers Bowers reporting puts forward. Does that particular accounting genuinely change how you personally read everything that followed with that charity afterward? Or does one critical biographer's account genuinely deserve more independent scrutiny before anyone treats it as the complete, settled picture of what actually happened there financially? Let me know your genuinely honest take on all of this down in the comments below. I read every single one, and they genuinely shape what we decide to cover next on this channel. And if stories like this one, walked through carefully rather than just repeating whatever headline generated the most outrage, are exactly what you come here for, go ahead and subscribe to Palace Insider so you don't end up missing the next one. And a like genuinely helps more than you'd probably think, especially for a channel still building its audience. It's honestly the easiest way to support this kind of work if tonight's story kept you watching all the way through.